this world and its population, which I deem and diagnose as evil. In some cases, pure evil. A world, nonetheless, in which people have the opportunity to reveal themselves as more than evil. And I am one individual who has sought to do just that. To be more than evil, to be something other than evil, to not be turned into evil. A little bit of a personal update. I suppose it could be seen as some good news. My land has sold. It has gone from the state of being put on the market to someone showing interest in it to the land being sold. I guess in a best case scenario, it's a positive sign for me in my life, a life that's been very painful. A positive sign that the land wasn't totally vandalized by evil ones, although that fear was very strong within me. But there's a fair amount of evil in the whole situation, in the fact that it was my dream to live off the grid, to own my own land, and it was a nightmare of sorts, however, going through what I went through there. And that includes the experience of reaching out to the mental health field, to the so-called professionals. And so when I talk about the evil of this world, several categories come to mind. The mental health field comes to mind, so does the world of social justice, as well as the religious/spiritual communities, as well as the arena of conspiracy theorists. And each one of these realms or spheres has meant something to me. Each one has been something that I thought that I could contribute something to in a way I have. And yet, despite my contributions to this world, I see nothing but evil looking back at me. A quote from the American Horror Story, Asylum, the miniseries which I just completed: "Be careful about looking into the face of evil, for it may look back at you." Could that be a way to describe my life? I reflect upon my life and my key ideas at this moment of junction in my life, a period in which the stress at times is so great, stress that comes from fear of the future, fear of persecution, my soul persecuted by this world, using my ethnicity and my ideas as an excuse, using my criminal history, including that which has been fabricated, as an excuse. It feels like a world in which we're born into that sacrifice us upon the altar, an altar of evil. A period in time in which I feel that I must reinvent myself or be reborn, to walk away from the person that I once was. A period in time in which we are now exactly 2 months after my last upload to YouTube, which has since been delisted. I thought that it was not a good idea to be reaching out to the world again, because no good can come from it in this evil world, from continuing to speak to people, to trying to help people, or to create more and more content on YouTube to cover up the slander that has been put out about me. The slander about me, which my mind in this world has been obsessed with, as I've developed obsessive compulsive disorder in a more extreme way over the course of the last year, which has really come about from my trauma of a lifetime of being bullied, of feeling marginalized, of being afraid, and continuing to share information about myself in search of friends or a sense of family, only to find stalkers and enemies. And as I pace back and forth in my pajamas at noon, I look at myself in the mirror, my unshaven face in the mirror, and I see a man growing older. I see an ethnic face. I see what they see. And I know that it is important for me to reflect upon my life and to communicate my story. And that is so difficult for me to do. So it's a period in time in which I have not uploaded in almost 2 months on my Patreon page, staying true to my word. As I spoke the words on September 1st, 2020, in a private discourse, that the time had arrived, despite my ego wanting to protect myself and my online image, despite wanting to return to the good old days are gone. The hope in humanity revealing itself is gone. And in seeing the true nature of humanity for what it is, there is a strong desire to release myself or to free myself from this world, from what I thought was my job, from a lifestyle seemingly hell-bent on saving people, informing people. I knew that it was the right thing to do to delist many videos that I had on YouTube, including those about my perceptions of a upcoming Chinese invasion. Seeing that there's disinformation on the internet that caters to the far right, that caters to the QAnon crowd, that caters to Donald Trump fans. Disinformation, a lot like the disinformation that I talked about years ago, the cry wolf syndrome, where certain people have been talking about the impending invasion for years and years, as far back as 2000, 2003. Certain people that were even mentioned by the realtor. Just a reminder to how pervasive this propaganda is, even in a world in which I will reduce my associations to less than a handful. The lies of the devil, if you will still be retold and reheard by the few people that are around us. I don't want people that follow that level of fake news looking in my direction. So I was right to have the common sense to delist those videos. And before the year is out, more may be delisted still. This is an evil world in which the technology has been unleashed that allows people to cyberstalk us, that allows things to be auto-suggested next to our name, like Twitter or other social media websites, where even if a certain name or person or celebrity isn't posting anymore, things about them may be posted, including where they are, if they're seen. And so as we see technology rise, we see the great evil within this species revealing itself and becoming far more obvious in a world where in reality there are no lies. There are the attempts to lie, the attempts to cover up, but for those that are truly awake, there are no lies. It is clear to see that this is an evil world that has set many people up. It is a world that seemingly consumes the human beings within it. Consumes them. Where human beings consume other humans. Just like they consume animals. In a world in which they've gone from hunting the animals to hunting humans. So it's a critical junction in time in which I closed the door on the uploading of content to an energy vampire audience that has done nothing to back me up, that has revealed itself to be completely devoid of intuition. I've asked my friend multiple times regarding the comment section, which he's moderated, has anyone ever truly asked me how I'm doing? Is there any sign in this biological sea of life, these Homo sapiens, these humanoids, there's an intuitive one amongst them that understands what I've been through and why I'm not speaking at this time? One would think that I would have a lot to say and a lot to offer, that a lot of things that I've warned about have come to pass and are coming to pass. No sign of conscious life whatsoever. So what does this mean? And as I see many things that I've warned about come to pass, certain things that I fear for myself, I don't wish to see happen. But I struggle nonetheless. Not from delusions, however. I struggle from the things that I know. As we see Donald Trump tell the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. As we see 13 arrested in a plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan. As we see elements around society brainwashed to commit these heinous acts of crime, these heinous acts of domestic terrorism. So it's at this point in time in which I'm able to walk away from those uploads and walk away from my land. And it's at this point in time, upon a request to a particular facility in which I was seeking counseling, therapy, psychiatric evaluation, that I received my medical records. And that's not something that I'm going to be reading at this moment, but it's something that brought a fair amount of sorrow when I did go through it. In this day and age, with all these things coming out about racism and domestic terrorism, my issues were never treated as real issues, as concerns. I was never seen as a person that was suffering from duress and from trauma, but a person that was seen as someone suffering from mania and illusions. And that's clear in the notes, in the write-ups after the sessions provided by the therapist. No actual sense of care whatsoever. A great deal of judgment. And for someone that doesn't know me or have an understanding of these issues, they would look at those things and those notes as something describing a crazy person or someone that should be committed to an asylum. I want to leave my thoughts, my comments on that fairly brief because that's its own topic. But I think that in the breakdown there is the breakthrough, that there are things in this world that happen to us that insult our pride, that insult our intelligence, that insult everything that we've worked for, and perhaps certain things are for a reason. And on one hand, I did leave that community and that region of North America, and I came here. And it's not that I enjoy living here so much as I needed to get out of there. And I'll be seeing a psychiatrist tomorrow, who in fact will more than likely be prescribing some anti-anxiety medication. And perhaps at that point, I will be recording podcasts less and less and less. But this moment was coming. A moment in which the anxiety and depression, although I don't believe that I should be taking antidepressants, but that the things that I've been going through would be too much to bear to continue to go through this unmedicated. So now I'm willing. But it's a means to an end. But I need to take this time before I begin to take that medication to cope with my fears and anxiety of continuing to be harassed or stalked by people online. It's important that I take the time now to record my thoughts and to reflect upon this evil world because it is the awareness of how pervasive the evil is that enables me to walk away from not only uploading constantly to the internet, but to walk away from people in general, the seeking of friends. There's a part of my biology that wants a woman in my life, that still wants love. But yet there seems to be evil in that too, in this society. You know, there are stereotypes in Hollywood and in literature about the person that starts to see evil in this world as a crazy person, or as a person that wants to see people harmed. And that's not fair either. Because it's in the renouncing of this world and the people in it and our parents that sets us free from the blind love of this world. And this world, as I said before in other videos, some of which I've privated since, this world is some sort of a purgatory. It is a world of evil, but we have an opportunity to prove ourselves, and I've tried to do that for multiple years. But there's no need for me to continue and continue and continue to try to help these people. And there is no purpose in living in nature in certain parts of this country or world when I can see clearly that the people that live in nature are evil themselves. Where I can look at the people in this city and I can look at the people in nature and see no real measurable difference. Good versus evil, evil versus good, when it comes to the barometer. It's still the same intellectual animal. Now, that is a term that is used in this book that I've almost finished reading. It's about to go back to the library, and it's called The Gnostic Bible, the Pistis Sophia Unveiled, the secret teaching of Jesus recorded by his disciples. So there's a lot of references to the rising up above the psychic aggregates, the 7 deadly sins, lust, anger, greed, gluttony, delusion, things of that nature, and going back to spirit. And moving forward from this point on, I need to make that a greater goal in my life, to set myself free of this world, to do the things that I need to do for myself to free myself of those psychic aggregates of the lower selves. And it's not needed for me to be speaking to other people in order to do that. What I did was my job spiritually as an asset to the Creator. I put out information that can help people see reality as it is. It never meant that I had all the answers. But I was always gifted with a certain amount of insight in this world to help people see the obvious. And for whatever reason, my spirit was thrust into a combination of genetics which would be rejected by this world. So I'm going to read a few passages from this book in a little bit. But going over these categories of evil. Moving on from the mental health field. It does hurt to see their words about me. And there is some sadness within me, reaching a point in my life where I'm willing to take a medication to deal with my anxiety. But there's a part of me that feels that it must be done. But I have to be careful how much I share this time around with the psychiatrist. But I was honest with the initial person that gave me the first evaluation, including about certain perceptions that the internet communicates with me. I realize that they're not going to buy into any idea regarding psychic awareness. And they're going to see that as a schizoid affective disorder. But it's a means to an end. And at some point, I need to be able to obtain the resources so that I can live independently. I'd like to have my own place. I'd like to have some income. And this is a very critical time for me to walk away from the person that I was, as well as moving away from where I was living. in order to transform into someone new. And so this is a very critical time in my life to segue from one way of living to the other. So these four main categories, the religious community, spiritual community, conspiracy theorists, the mental health field, and social justice. Moving on to the second. We can see concerns from black women and black people on the media today, and multiple NBC specials on the effects of racism on mental health. And so there's an element of the mainstream that will acknowledge that, not that these corporations truly care about people of color. There's more or less a sense of peer pressure for them to cover particular topics to continue to appease the audience, to continue to receive the views, and be seen as credible and relevant. When in reality, there is no mention of the people of Middle Eastern bloodlines or ethnicities whatsoever. There isn't an anti-war movement. There was recently also a beheading in France, which resulted in Islamist groups, quote unquote, being raided. And there's a sense of another cycle returning. That this is just a pause in this bloodthirsty world with a seemingly never-ending war on those people. This appears to be just another pause before other major events begin to take place. Maybe even, as I thought years ago, by the year or in the year 2022. Some of the things that I've been concerned about, certain projections that I've had, I hope that I am very, very wrong. But at the very least, I moved away from where I was. And at least here in this year of 2020, I am able to see the writing on the wall as much as it is painful. How evil people are. The nature of the audience. Only interested in its own entertainment, completely without intuition and a heart. So it would be painful for me to realize this truth. I would be lonely. I would be very sad. But I would be able to see them as they are and hopefully fade out of their memory. So by the time some of these events start kicking off in the next year, or maybe even the next few months, I will not be strongly in their memory. I will be, unfortunately, in the memory of certain individuals, for evil individuals don't forget, or don't seem to. There is this sense of going back to the nature of evil in the world, because we're not just talking about human beings. In a way that the world itself is indicted. The physics of this world seems to reward evil people and punish good. Where there's no positive reinforcement or reward for good deeds, at least not in this world, and there is a reward, and in some cases monetary compensation for wicked individuals. And technology as it exists today is carrying these white supremacists, if you will, on chariots. For multiple years, I've seen the reality of this in spirit and felt it in my waking state. And we can look at NPR, which presents itself to be left-wing and something opposite than the right, but yet we still see the same white dominance. They may have a message that's anti-capitalist, but yet they dominate the airwaves. They dominate thought. They pick and choose which, quote-unquote, people of color they talk to, as they also work to appear to continue to be relevant and honest, but are still in reality part of that colonial system that they claim to be speaking out against. And so it's a world of deception. And it's a population that goes along with that evil, with that unconsciousness, which is another way to refer to it. From evil to unconsciousness to ignorance to delusion to a world of lies. All these things, all these concepts are strung together, are connected together. I read a little bit about the beliefs of Zoroastrianism. And the followers of that faith are compelled to speak against evil constantly throughout their lives. To be able to see the difference between truth and lie. And that a soul is measured by their deeds. And certain things I've always believed within my life. And I never came across certain books early on in my life or followed certain faiths. I just spoke the truth that seemed to be obvious within myself, within every cell in my being, to speak about certain truths. And so I did that. And I spoke about being an asset to the Creator. I spoke of faith in the Creator without being a member of any religion. When I traveled, for example, like the first time I went to a particular state while leaving the city of my birth, I spoke about having faith in the Creator. At times that faith has been shaken up by the evil of this world. But I will still say that I have it. It's just that at times the pain of what I've been through and the trauma has caused me to question my will to live. It's at a moment in time in which I can say that I have looked online for information about what are some of the most poisonous seeds out there, plant seeds that one can obtain to kill oneself. I could say that the stress that I've gone through regarding feeling misunderstood, alone, abandoned by this world, looked upon by the evil, feeling cursed to be in the bloodline that I am, to feel so alone, to fear the future, that I've thought about living in an asylum. Wondering what my future would be. And right now my goals aren't very expansive. They tend to revolve around some sort of government assistance, from housing to money. In a way, I'm already dependent on someone else. And so I miss my independence, even though this is a good person. I still miss my independence. But there's a part of me that looks forward to the afterlife. And it may be important for me to stick around for a number of years in order to do more good. My work may not be over. So in the breakdown and the thoughts of suicide and living in an asylum so I'm safe, how many people are going to track me down to an asylum and try to hurt me there? But see, it doesn't mean that needs to happen, nor suicide. In the breakdown, there needs to be some sort of a breakthrough. And that's where this private podcast series comes into view. Now at the 20th, and I don't know how many more there really needs to be. It seems to be that what needs to happen at this point moving forward is an effort to transcribe these words into print so that they could be read, so that my words can help people see the light. Maybe it is my destiny to help people in some way, educate them in some way, and to help some young people live in this world more now than the world of tomorrow. To prevent suicides. And to help them understand this world of oppression that the social justice movements are not helping them with. I remember speaking to a publication online about the things that I feared about this world and the world that is to come within this world, a world of increased discrimination. And it was a cry for help. It wasn't meant to be a breadcrumb to those that would see themselves as my enemy or enemies, to those that would be involved in stalking and slander. It was never meant to be a breadcrumb to attract that energy. It was a cry for help. It wasn't meant to be seen as delusional to the very people that I trusted, that I spoke with, that I shared secrets with. Secrets of fears, of nightmares. I never did that to intentionally be ignored or be scoffed at or to be seen as mentally ill, with a number of mental illnesses, completely ignoring the trauma that I've endured. But it's exactly what happened. So I can look at these networks like NBC and others, how they might have a black woman talk about the mental health consequences of racism and how it affects the body, and be reminded of this evil of this world that will treat me like an inmate or a patient, a basket case, a nobody. After everything that I've tried to do to help this world and to share perspectives that others don't share, I see someone else given the mic and someone else being recognized. And that is a world of evil. That is a world in which this is the asylum. And the only escape from that and that pain seems to be passing out of this world. And it seems to be my responsibility to know that there is a time for that. And that time should not come before our work is done. I've reached out to religious organizations and spiritual communities. And yet the way that I talk, the rate that I speak, or the information that I share is deemed to be unworthy. It's seen as one big giant delusional conspiracy theory to them. And yet to the conspiracy theorists themselves, I can easily be seen as the conspiracy to them. An agent of the deep state, as they would say in the modern slang. That's been manufactured for them in the polarized divide and conquer game. Perhaps all of this was meant to happen for me to lose faith in humanity and the world, to see the evil within the world and humanity, to look even more to God and my angels. And that's what I intend to do. But people ask for solutions, but yet they ignore the solutions that they're given and do nothing to truly build community or to help anyone. They want the solutions that are acceptable to their belief system. They want things to be conformed to their own understanding, or they will discard it. And I think that that is a critical part of the spiritual solution, which is really the only solution we should be seeking for ourselves, to liberate ourselves from this soul prison. And realizing that the world is evil is a big part of that. Not to hurt the world or to wish harm upon the world, but to really wish for the liberation from this experience. By falling in love with people and movements that is of this world. Falling in love with places. It seems to be that one needs to have their heart broken in order to truly see the true light. And so in this breakdown, and in this low period in my life, one in which I've thought about hiding in an asylum or poisoning myself with a number of plant seeds, may these things be just passings. thoughts that are passing through me that in fact will lead me to a higher understanding. And so this is why I've sought to read literature of a spiritual nature. I'm going to go to various pages. And so there is an interpretation of the Pisa Sophia that is given by Samuel Onwar, and I'm going to read that. We must not ever forget that the inferno and paradise exist right here, not in any other world. The inferno is found situated within ourselves and within the womb of earth. Paradise is found situated within the being and in the superior dimensions of the world. We gain the right to enter into paradise only by working the flame forge of Vulcan, which is situated in the inferno and within the august darkness of no being. And you'll have to excuse me, I was actually reading the wrong page. Because the things that I plan to read are a little bit more direct regarding the nature of this world and references to the coming destruction of this world. Because while I don't wish harm upon anyone, it seems to be that this is evil incarnate, even if we want to be compassionate. And there's a place to be compassionate, and there's a place in which we're just giving and giving and giving constantly of ourselves, trying to save the world, but the world and the people can't be saved. They are destroying themselves, and they're going against the laws of nature. So certain outcomes may be inevitable, and it may be important for us to see the world as it is and why it is meeting a certain fate. And knowing that the world is going to meet a certain fate and maybe meeting it now may help us on the individual level make better decisions in the time that we remain here. Going now to page 95. The 13 Aeon reminds us of the 13 heavens of the Aztecs, or Nahuas from ancient Mexico. There are also 13 Katuns among the Mayans of Yucatan. These are the 13th prophetic Katuns, 13 periods of time for each human race. Obviously, the prophecies for each one of the past Katuns of our Aryan root race were exactly fulfilled. Presently, we are approaching the 13th Katun. The Mayans say that between the years 2040 and 2043, the 13th Katun will enter into activity. The great catastrophe that will destroy this present humanity that lives on the 5 continents of the world will occur during the 13th Katun. Now I'm going to go to page 113. Now before I read the next passage, regarding the evil of this world, it also seems to be important for me to reference this moment in time with the coronavirus. And despite the fact that we kept hearing about how it's a dangerous global pandemic, why then have white supremacists evaded their karma? What is the true nature of the coronavirus? Why does the coronavirus seem to usher in a new era of oppression for people of color? Why have so many white people and white supremacists found themselves consciously immune to COVID-19? Not wearing masks because they're not afraid of the pandemic because they see themselves as immune, while others, Hispanics and others that aren't counted or referenced, do not seem immune and seem to represent the higher death toll. That appears to be another shred of evidence that this world may be inherently evil as well. I have no malice for the earth spirit, but I cannot assume that the world is inherently good at this point. I cannot do that. Not when there's a pandemic that fails to truly reset the social order in the way that it should be. It's ushering in a new wave of oppression. So a little bit about the Antichrist. The material powers of the self-willed intellect surround Sophia, an oppressor. The self-willed intellect of the Antichrist, expressing itself everywhere, looks with disregard at Sophia. The intellectual Antichrist detests Pisces Sophia. The intellectual Antichrist, the living manifestation of the ego, performs false miracles and deceitful prodigies everywhere. Atomic bombs, supersonic airplanes, atomic submarines, teleguided atomic rockets, travel to the moon, etc. The hatred of the Antichrist towards Sophia is shown through all of these false miracles and marvels. All the people kneel in the presence of the Antichrist and say, "Who is like unto the beast?" The lion-faced false intellectual light power with his dominion laughs, usurps the place of Sophia, and works in order to take away all of Sophia's luminous powers. False doctrines are propagated everywhere, taking the eternal values from this poor suffering humanity. The absurd materialism and the repugnant atheism want to carry away all of Sophia's powers of light. The Antichrist of intellectualism is presumptuously seated upon the throne of Sophia in these tenebrious times of Kali Yuga, in vespers of the 13th Khatun. This occurs while the catastrophe is approaching, which will completely change the physiognomy of the terrestrial crust and will end the human species. Now going to page 153. But adding some commentary. So you see how this whole prepper movement is about the survival of certain types of humans. Not even all of humanity surviving, but certain types of humans. And many people have given their life to the prepper movement and yet have completely overlooked the great destruction that humanity has brought other forms of humanity, as well as the earth itself. And so for years, some people have come to a certain level of awareness that mankind is a virus. And those thoughts, by and large, have been demonized. But yet the truth appears to be in plain sight, as well as the hypocrisy, as we can clearly see those same humans rejecting the idea of mankind being a virus, propping up their own society and civilization while demonizing other human beings as a virus, being very selective, being very hypocritical, and openly engaging in genocide of third world countries, or in support of leaders and rulers that are engaging in genocide. But removing that reality from the discussion, when they talk about the evils of this world, when they talk about the evil of this world, they don't reference what their rulers are doing. They point their fucking fingers at other forms of humanoid life that don't look like them and point to their existence as a threat. So their thoughts are toxic. And there is no sign that I've ever seen in this world, in this lifetime, of humans getting better, saying they're sorry. It's only in the media, by the way, in which we see reformed white supremacists or people talking about how they've woken up from that type of consciousness. In my experience, people are only getting worse, like rotting meat. Their consciousness, for whatever reason in this dimension, is only becoming more evil and more apathetic. In this world, for whatever reason, there isn't any real good coming about from mankind's actions or learning from its mistakes, but trying to find ways to cover up its mistakes, to erase history, to stop talking about those people, and that there would be no real difference between the left and the right, and their silence regarding the victims of wars and countries that have been destroyed around the world at the hands of their own government. There would be a way in which they would be able to live with themselves and their own bullshit. Now reading from page 153. Gnosis will illuminate the consciousness and will liberate the oppressed. The inner Christ will place his name in the soul, in the sacred mystery, in the real power. Then the solar dynasties will govern the populations, and the entire earth will be a paradise. The future root race will reside in new continents, because the present continents will remain at the bottom of the seas, after being burned by ardent, A-R-D-E-N-T, ardent fire. The gigantic planet known as Herculaneum is approaching now. It is a world thousands of times larger than the Earth. Obviously, when Herculaneum is excessively close to the Earth, it will attract the liquid fire from the interior of the world towards the surface, and then all which is alive will be burned. I'm just going to pause right there. There was a prophecy with regards to Zoroastrianism that there would be molten steel, liquid steel, if you will, burning the surface of the earth in the last days. But the righteous, the truly spiritual, will not be harmed. So what I do is I look for patterns in some of these spiritual belief systems and understandings that I feel magnetically attracted to. Obviously, when Herculaneum is excessively close to the earth, it will attract the liquid fire from the interior of the world, I already read that, towards the surface, then all which is alive will be burned. A complete revolution of the axis of the earth will take place upon the maximum approach of Herculaneum. The poles will then be converted into the equator and the equator into the poles. The oceans will change ground and the present continents will be on the bottom of the oceans. A small group will be saved so they can serve as a seed plot for the future sixth root race. This group will also be mixed with people from other worlds for their complete regeneration. The new race of Pisces can only come from a strong and regenerated group. Now going to 155. By disintegrating these psychic aggregates, living personifications of our psychological defects, we will firmly establish ourselves in the heaven of our psychological country, which means in the superior levels of our own being, here and now. By disintegrating the psychic aggregates is how we will make a master of our own life, a master work of our own life, rather. The psychological country of each one of us fears the name of the Lord and the kings of the earth. The red demons of Seth, the living personifications of our psychological defects, fear the sovereignty of the inner Christ. The red demons of Seth know very well that the sovereignty of the Lord signifies their death. The Lord will build Zion, which means our interior universe, the existential superior bodies of the being, and he will also reveal himself in his sovereignty. The Lord never despises the prayer of the humble one. All this will be understood by the future generation, the new root race, that will be born into a newly transformed earth following the great cataclysm. So pausing, all my life I've been talking about future events and cataclysms, but future generations that would have the insight to understand words that people alive today did not understand. Granted that the words, find them. That is why the writing of certain ideas, the documenting of certain ideas, seems to be a very important task for the soul. I even think constantly about my next level of work, even though I won't be uploading new content, taking the content, the words that have already been said and have been disregarded by the people alive today, and information that resulted in me being targeted and slandered and attacked, so I would shut up. Those words living on for future generations by transcribing old videos from years ago. This is on my mind often, going back to the book. Whoever pronounces himself against the inner Christ is the Antichrist. The false materialistic science has been created by the mind of the Antichrist. The Antichrist is the Machiavellian mind of the materialistic scientists who perform miracles and misleading prodigies. The evil minds of the dwellers of the earth is the Antichrist. The Antichrist humanity, which is this present humanity, will perish between fire and water. Thus, this is how the Antichrist will lose its power. The same happens within the initiate who wishes to return to the 13th aeon. The Antichrist succumbs within the initiate who returns to the 13th aeon. All the powers in the false light of the Antichrist will succumb within the initiate. The initiate gains the crystallization of the superior forces of nature and the cosmos within himself, replacing the Antichrist and its power. The matter of the prince of this world must remain without any light in it. The emanations of the prince of this world fall into the inferior chaos. Going now to page 304. Very shortly in the direction that we are going in, death, assassination, vice, and perversity multiplied to its maximum will reign in every home. The great catastrophe that is expected has converted itself into a non-delayable necessity. Only the great catastrophe can save us from the most horrifying terrors that the ego will let loose over the face of the earth. Presently, we have no more hope except for the universal blazing fire. Christ is the virtue that departs from the spaces with the mysteries of the light kingdom. The inner Christ, expressing himself through the perfect man, is always the master who teaches. Christ always speaks. He is the verb who shows us the danger. The word of the Lord has already warned us about the present time and the catastrophe that is approaching. Before the great catastrophe, wars, hunger, and sicknesses will multiply, and horrible atomic holocausts will destroy this perverse civilization of vipers. Now, pausing again. This is a world in which the ego mind of the people within it, for the most part, wants to lift the world up and say also that humanity is generally good. That it's just these rulers and leaders and presidents and politicians that are the evil ones, and they don't take accountability for their own actions. We've just looked at the conspiracy theorists, the spiritual communities that reflected in my own life, my engagement with these people, social justice movement, and the mental health field. And there is no good at present that can be found within them, within the narcissistic population that seeks to only appease its own ego, to see itself as good, but doesn't want to actually be good to defeat evil, doesn't actually want to save people from being harmed by others, but would rather laugh at them or see them as weak or poisoned in some way. mentally ill in some way. And that's the true nature of human consciousness. Looking at itself incessantly. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Who's the prettiest of them all? Vanity. It is lost in vanity. And will exile those individuals that actually have information that could save them or could lead them to safer places or to safer thoughts. But I would agree that it's too late now for the species, and there's purpose in being born. There's a reason why we were born in this place, in this asylum, in this soul prison. There is a reason why we are here. And few people depart on the path of that truth. Page 307. The Antichrist, the ego, knows nothing about these things. He merely wants a mechanical man and a universe that was originated by chance, an absurd miracle from a reason without reason. On the other hand, religion hates Lucifer and curses him without knowing that he is the part of the inner Christ. And so that's something that I don't know a lot about. But we do know that religion has co-opted many spiritual ideas and has perverted many ideas and concepts. The processes of cells and atoms would not be possible without the existence of intelligent, ingenious principles. Those who ignore this fact are as ignorant as those religious fanatics who hate Lucifer. So that is an interesting perspective. We are not reading Satanism, by the way. We are reading Gnosis. But often Gnostics are slandered because elements of Gnostic literature do have certain perspectives like that shared. Moving forward to page 400. This is the reason why this present root race will be destroyed in the 13th cartoon of the Mayans. Let me go back to the previous page, because it sets it up. Unquestionably, the true man can be born within the human organism based on conscious works and voluntary suffering. Nevertheless, it is written, not all men achieve the fusion with divinity. It also says earlier, the sun wants a harvest of solar men. The real man, human being, must convert himself into a bodhisattva in order to completely fuse himself with divinity. Obviously, only the bodhisattvas with compassionate hearts can incarnate Christ. It has always been said, and for good reason, that Christ is the bodhisattva. Solar men are truly the ingathering of the supreme light of the aeons. The sun now wants a new harvest of solar men, and it deserves it due to the great work performed with organic life. The sun has worked intensely in this delicate thin covering of organic life placed over the geological crust of the earth. Now the sun wants to see the result of its works. The sun wishes to have a new harvest of solar men at once. Every race of humanoids serves the solar experiment. Nevertheless, when a race is becoming too lunar, mechanical, and materialistic, the sun destroys it, because it is no longer useful for its experiment. Such is the case of this present Aryan root race, which has become vulgar, crude, atheistic, and frightfully materialistic. This is the reason why this present root race will be destroyed in the 13th cartoon of the Mayans. Nevertheless, before the great catastrophe which is approaching, the sun will obtain a small harvest of solar men. Sounds like another interpretation of the rapture or ascension. Truly, the sun will harvest only in a few solar, exemplary individuals in this epoch. It is clear that this present root race of humanoids, which populates the face of the earth, presents no hope whatsoever. This Aryan root race has reached maximum degeneration. Therefore, it will be suddenly destroyed. Fortunate are those who live in the region of the souls who have received the first mystery of the first mystery. Verily, they will be fellow kings with the first Savior of the first voice of the treasury of the light. Now, I have been talking about the sun for a number of years, Going back to page 345, major changes that the sun will bring our world. And so to read these ideas, it's validating, it's confirming, and especially when we talk about letting go and moving on from one way of life to another, trying to save people, civilization, or trying to appease the ego, being concerned about what people think about me and my appearance and my ethnicity. These are not a people or a society to appease. These are not good souls. This is not collectively a good world. The people that have labeled this world good and holy and conscious are wrong. There was always a great lie between the New Age movement talking about the collective shift in consciousness, which is a perversion of spiritual ideas, because that's not what we've seen. We have seen a shift of consciousness, but it's been towards evil, serving evil, worshiping oneself, looking away from the suffering of others. And there has been so much suffering, especially since after 9/11, of just a few countries at the hand of their own countries. What have they done to raise consciousness regarding those things? When have people turned away from me when I talked about the truth behind that day, being September 11th? Most people can't see the spirituality in that. Questioning a narrative which has been used to justify a genocide. Only an unconscious human would not understand the significance of 9/11 and the truth about it. Only an unconscious human would be ignorant to the fact that the lives of 9/11 have been used to justify a genocide. Only an apathetic human would feel nothing. So we are here, in my opinion, to truly renounce this world, and in some cases our parents. Because our true parents are in spirit. It is not about the DNA or the materialistic or the animalistic. Reading now from page 344. Pure science is the science of the being. Distinguish between the science of Christ and the science of the Antichrist. For these times of worldly crises and bankruptcies of all principles, the science of the Antichrist performs miracles and crooked prodigies. Every knee is bent in the presence of the Antichrist, because the Antichrist makes atomic bombs, N-bombs, H-bombs, rays of death, and manned spacecraft to the moon, etc. The materialistic science of the Antichrist, with all its rotten theories, absurd utopias, hypothesis, and barbarism of all types, is worshipped by the great harlot. The number of the great harlot is 666. You know this. Mercury causes us to descend from the heights of the chaos, but it also causes us to part from the abyss and return to the 13th aeon. It is obvious that through sex we descend, fall, or ascend. We must distinguish between a fall and a descent. Those who follow the nirvanic spiral path, those who do not march in the Eightfold Path, are at the height of the middle. Clearly, those of the spiral suffer less because their triumphs are few. Those of the direct path suffer a great deal because their triumphs are many. Christ liberates us and confers power over the bonds in order to loosen them. And I could also open this book to various places. And perhaps another time would be better for that. I am to return this book to the library. But one can obtain a great deal of knowledge from books when they open up to random pages and read. I'll do a little bit of that. I will do a little bit of that in the future. But at this point, this is going to conclude this podcast. and I will soon be completing this private podcast series. I am, as I said, in a period of personal transformation from one way of living to another. And I pray directly to the true creator of this universe to give me the strength to carry on in this rebirth, moving forward into an unknown future. This completes the 20th private discourse recorded on October 21st, 2020.